If you're in a band, one of your career highlights is to have either a hit or a series of hits. And usually that's the way it goes. You have your band, you're in your band, you have your hits, and that's pretty much it. But then there are sometimes people who go from one band to another and continue to have success and continue to rack up hits with that secondary group that they joined. And sometimes you can go to a third group too, or even more sometimes depending on the musician. But anyway, so that's what we're going to talk about today, basically. People who had success with one band, left there, went to another band, and had success with that band too. This is our regular look at what goes on inside the grooves. It's a program we call Platter Chatter. From the set of Goin Vinyl, this is Platter Chatter, the web series that features classic trends and classic tracks. I'm your host, Bill Robert, and before we get going today, I'd just like to remind you once again, please hit the like button and also the subscribe button on YouTube here, so that way we can get credit for likes. And also, if you subscribe, you can be around for other content anytime we come out with a new episode of Platter Chatter, or even our main show, Goin Vinyl. You can catch any of that. All you have to do is subscribe. You can also check us out on our Facebook page. It is Goin Vinyl TV. And if you have a suggestion, maybe a subject for the show, something you'd like to see done, you can either hit me up in the comments here or just send me an email. Email address is billthedj@goinvinyl.com. So today we're talking about people who were part of one band and then left that band, went to another band, and then had more success. Now, I'm not talking about people that went and had solo albums. We have plenty of that, and we've already talked about that a little bit. I'm talking about basically someone who's in a band, in the structure of a band. They leave one band, join another band, and have success there. At least there, maybe even with another band, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. And the first example is going to be in 1969. 1969, there was a band called the Archies, and actually it was a fictitious band because it was from the Archie cartoon TV show based on the comic book. So basically, the Archies was Archie and Jughead and Veronica and all that. They were all part of the Archies. So obviously, they had a song, and musicians had to record the song. And so they recorded, basically it was released as a single by the Archies, by the cartoon band. And believe it or not, it went to number one, complete number one. The song, you might know it, it's called Sugar Sugar, Sugar Sugar, hey honey honey, you're my candy girl, that one. Okay, so that one. Now the thing about that was, the guy who did the singing in that was a guy named Ron Dante. So later on in 1969, there was a group called the Cufflinks who had a hit single called Tracy, went top 10. I think it peaked at number 9 back in the later part of 1969. And so basically, that was a hit too. And the lead singer on that group was also Ron Dante. So Ron Dante had the hit with the Archies, and he had the hit with the Cufflinks. So right there, just in the space of 1 year. Now after that, he didn't have another hit with another band. No, he just went out and produced 9 Barry Manilow albums. We're talking about his first 9 albums. So like Mandy, Somewhere in the Night, Ready to Take a Chance Again, Copacabana. I mean, he produced all of those. So Ron Dante had hits, but also later on went to produce Barry Manilow. But we're not going to mention, we already told you a little bit about his story, but we're not going to be featuring him today. So let's go to artist number 1 right now. And we talk about people that were members of bands. And this is probably one of the best known bands, one of the most legendary bands of all time. And of course, I'm talking about the Beatles. And when the Beatles broke up, they all went their separate ways. John Lennon had solo stuff, but he also had some stuff with the Plastic Ono Band. George Harrison went solo, remember All Things Must Pass. Ringo had a bunch of solo stuff too. And Paul McCartney had solo stuff too. He had the McCartney album and a few others. And then he formed another group called Wings, and they started having hits too. So this is our first example of someone who was in one band, had hits, and then went to another band and had hits. Pretty much, this guy is the prototype of it. And we're going to start with Paul McCartney back in his Beatle days, and it's All My Loving.
Close your eyes and I'll kiss you. Tomorrow I'll miss you. Remember, I'll always be true. And then while I'm away, I'll ride home every day, and I'll send all my loving to you.
So technically, All My Loving was not released as a single by the Beatles here in the U.S., but it didn't matter because the song wound up all over the radio anyway and became one of their most favorite songs of all time. So we're going to jump ahead now, probably about, 12 years or so. We go from 1964, All My Lovin', and one of the biggest hits Paul McCartney had with Wings from the Speed of Sound album in 1976, Silly Love Songs.
Some people wanna fill the world with silly love songs. And what's wrong with that? I'd like to know. 'Cause here I go again. I love
So that's our first example of someone who had hits with one band and then went to another band and had hits with them too. In fact, I think McCartney's probably the prototype because he had a ton of hits with the Beatles and he had a ton of hits with the Wings too. So pretty successful in both ones, and he's probably the most popular example of this particular concept. Now we're going to switch gears, and someone who isn't really as well known. In fact, I'm going to drop the name and you're probably all going to go, huh? And the guy's name is Angel Ledesma. By the way, I'm not talking about the Ecuadorian soccer star either. There was a musician named Ish Ledesma. His nickname was Angel. So Angel Ledesma, who back in the late 70s was part of a group called Foxy, who had one big disco hit in 1979. It was the song Get Off. Okay, so that's it, Get Off by Foxy. Huge hit for that group too. It topped the R&B charts and peaked at number 9 on the Hot 100, so definitely a big hit. Foxy put out 3 albums after that. They had like one single that like barely cracked the top 40, so Get Off was basically their peak as far as chart success. So they splintered off and finally broke up about like 81, 82, sometime around there. And in 1983, Angel Ledesma was part of another group called OXO. You may remember this song. It was kind of one of those ones that did get in the top 40, and if you know it, you know it. If you don't, you don't. This one is from OXO. It's called Whirly Girl. Boy, that song's a lot of fun. OXO, Whirly, 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 what a whirly girl. Now, here's an interesting thing. When the song came out, a lot of people say, Whirly girl, what are they talking about? And actually in the video, basically they had a dancer like spinning around the whole time while they were playing the song. But it's like, whirly girl, what's a whirly girl? Where did that come from? Turns out that originally Angel Ledesma wrote the song in honor of his wife. He wanted to say, she's smart, she's intelligent, she's worldly, she's a worldly girl. Okay? And that's what the original title was, Worldly Girl. Okay? Now in that line, whirly, 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 what a whirly girl. Wordly, worldly, worldly. Yeah, it doesn't go. It's too much of a tongue tire. So he just took out, obviously he took out more than one letter, but changed the spelling a little bit. It went from worldly girl to whirly girl, and boom, they had a hit there. And that's the second hit from Angel Ledesma. He actually had another group, they had a minor hit too later on. We're not really going to get into that right now because we have other acts to get to right now. And let's go to number 3. Now, number 3 is a man who once upon a time fooled around and fell in love. Great vocalist, used to be with the Elvin Bishop Band. This is Mickey Thomas.
I didn't care how much they cried, no sir. The tears left me cold as a stone. But then I fooled around and fell in love. I fooled around and fell in love.
Yes, indeed. Fooled around and fell in love. Mickey Thomas was on the vocal, but the actual credit on the record, it's Elvin Bishop or the Elvin Bishop Band, and Fooled Around and Fell in Love. Now, shortly after that came out, I think like in the next couple of years, Mickey Thomas and Elvin Bishop kind of had a falling out, and Mickey wound up leaving the band. And then he was working on a skateboarding movie in 1978 and met up with the guitarist from Jefferson Starship. I think it was Craig Jaquiso. And so the two of them kind of get to know each other a little bit. Then shortly thereafter, Marty Balin leaves Jefferson Starship. And so Starship, well, they eventually become Starship, but they were called Starship colloquially back then. They invited Mickey Thomas to come in and join. So he became the lead vocalist for Jefferson Starship. And he was different too, because Marty Balin was more like, his songs like With Your Love and Miracles and Count on Me, and just, he had a much different, a much softer rock kind of approach to it. Whereas Mickey Thomas, just boom, he can just go. He's like Steve Perry as far as range. He can just go up there. And to give you an idea, the first album that Mickey Thomas played on as a member of Jefferson Starship was Freedom at Point Zero, which starts off with this song, in which I've used this phrase before from Bull Durham. Mickey Thomas basically announced his presence with authority. The song is Jane. Yeah, kind of like the guy in the movie Top Secret. This is not Mel Torme. Yeah, this is not Marty Bowen. It's Mickey Thomas, and his vocals took the band in an entirely new direction. But also, one of the nice things is, like, for things like Stranger and a few of the other songs, he does a nice job blending with Grace Slick when she hits her highs too. The two of them just made a really nice kind of, one off of each other. Just really nice blend of the two voices there. So that's Mickey Thomas, first with the Elvin Bishop Band, then with the Jefferson Starship, and that one was Jane. Now we're going to go to a guy who had a hit with one act, and then went to another act where he actually probably had the best success of his career, and then went from that to another thing where he didn't have as many, but he still had some charted hits, so he still had success. So literally, 3 bands: Bing, 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 hit, hit, hit. And the first band he was with was called Free. The song was All Right Now, and the vocalist we're talking about, Paul Rogers. We've talked about great vocalists like Steve Perry and Lou Gramm and people like that. But one of the things about Paul Rogers is he has such a distinctive voice. Yeah, he has a range too, but even in the lower registers, he just has such a husky, such an interesting voice. And he can do the screaming. Like my personal favorite Bad Company tune is Good Lovin' Gone Bad. But even stuff like Feel Like Making Love, he really kind of goes low and then can go high. So I mentioned he was in Free, so it was basically All Right Now. That was the song. And I kind of spoiled it for you because after he left Free, he, along with, I think it was with Simon Kirke, they formed Bad Company in the early 70s. And off their first album, Bad Company, here we go, instant hit. I mean, this thing the LP went #1 in the U.S., and the song was a #5 hit, Can't Get Enough.
Well, I'll take whatever I want, and baby, I want you. You give me something I need. Now tell me I got something for you. Come on, come on, come on and do it. Come on and do what you do. I can't get enough of your love.
So through the 70s, you heard a lot of All Right Now. That song was played like throughout the 70s. You still hear it nowadays. But then obviously you had Rogers with Bad Company. Bad Company is one of the groups that owned rock and roll radio through the decade of the 1970s. And then he left there around the end of the decade, tried a solo album in 1983. That didn't do much. But then he formed a supergroup. Okay, the members were Paul Rogers on vocals, Chris Slade on drums, Tony Franklin on bass, and the guitarist was a guy named Jimmy Page. Where have we heard of him from? Yeah, it's the Led Zeppelin guy. This one was from their first studio album. This single is Radioactive.
Well, I'm not uptight, not unattractive. Turn me on tonight, 'cause I'm a radioactive. Well, it's not a fight, and I'm not your captive. Turn me loose tonight, 'cause I'm a radioactive.
Okay, so that's The Firm with Radioactive, and that is the third example of Paul Rogers jumping from band to band to band and still having hit songs. In this particular case, now I mentioned in the 70s between Free and Bad Company, Paul Rogers' voice was on all over rock and roll radio. Still is, to be honest. And in 1985, this song, Radioactive, peaked at #25 on the Hot 100. But on the Billboard Mainstream Rock Chart, #1. Once again, Paul Rogers owning rock radio. Unfortunately, The Firm didn't last too long after that. They had a second album called Mean Business and a single with All the King's Horses. But pretty much after that, that was it. And that was it for The Firm. So that's our fourth example of going from band to band, or in this case, going from band to band to band. And we're going to keep that up because our next example also goes from band to band to band. And we first heard him back in 1975. He was part of a little-known and short-lived pub rock band called Ace. The vocalist we're talking about, this is Paul Carrack. and he was on Ace's song How Long.
And you said you was never intending to break up our scene in this way, but there ain't any use in pretending it could happen to us any day. How long has this been going on?
That's Ace with Paul Carrack on lead vocal, and How Long? That was a hit back in 1975. He left there not too long after and kind of went around doing different things for a while, playing keyboards on different albums. But then he was approached by Glenn Tilbrook of Squeeze. He joined Squeeze in 1979, and actually they did a record with him, and once again he had a single. It's actually one of Squeeze's biggest hits in the U.S. So he goes from Ace and has the hit with How Long, and then he goes to Squeeze and his hit with that band, Tempted.
Past the church and steeple, the laundry on the hill, billboards and the buildings, memories of it still keep calling and calling. But forget it all, I know I will. Tempted by the fruit of another.
So there we go. That's the second of Paul Carrack's journey through the music business, band to band to band. So he started out with Ace, had the hit with How Long, and then Tempted with Squeeze. Left Squeeze not too long after that, and then was kind of just kicking around once again, doing solo stuff and a few things over the years. And then in the mid-1980s, he was approached by Mike Rutherford, who at the time was obviously still the guitarist and bass player with Genesis, but he was doing a side project called the Mike and Mechanics. He invited Paul Carrack to join. Paul Carrack did join and added the vocals to this song, Silent Running on Dangerous Ground.
By now the fighting will be close at hand. Don't believe the church and state and everything they tell you. Believe in me, I'm with the high command. Can you hear me? Can you hear me running?
So there you go, example number 3 from Paul Carrack. It is Silent Running on Dangerous Ground, or just as most of us would call it, Silent Running. But anyway, he had other hits with Mike and the Mechanics too. You'll probably recognize his vocal from The Living Years as well, which was a big hit of Mike and the Mechanics' second album. So he was there. And then after all that, okay, he had, the hit with the band, the hit with the band, the hit with the band. But then he also had a top 10 hit as a solo artist in the U.S., a song called Don't Shed a Tear from his album One Good Reason. That was later on, and that was a number 9 song. So people love that Paul Carrack. They love his voice, and he's added his voice to a lot of things over the years, and people have bought a lot of those records. And that'll wrap up this edition of Platter Chatter. Obviously, since we're on YouTube, just don't forget to hit that like button. That'd be a great favor. And also, if you haven't hit subscribe already, subscribe, because this way you get more content, more great chats about more great music, and just basically collecting records and being a vinyl junkie, much like myself. So you can check us out on YouTube for the show Platter Chatter, which is what we have here, but also our main show, Goin Vinyl, which is up on that channel as well. You can also check us out on our Facebook page. It is Goin Vinyl TV. And if you have an idea for a show, a suggestion, something you might like to see on the show, either hit me up in the comments here, or all you have to do is send an email to billthedj@goinvinyl.com. And that'll do it for another installment of Platter Chatter. Thank you for tuning in, checking out the show today. I'm your host, Bill Robert, and don't forget to come back when we bring you more grooviness from the land where the platters still matter and the records still rock. So long. Thanks for watching.